Today we're gonna talk about clothes again. Someone asked me to do a video about wrinkles in clothes and if there's any difference, if there's different clothing material and stuff like that. So I thought about it, and there's a lot to cover when it's a very loosely question, but I will do my best as usual. So I thought up like this. Let's do, for instance, heavy clothes and light clothes. So what do I mean by heavy and light clothes? Well, for instance, heavy could be, like mail or armor and, leather, heavy, thick kind of material that doesn't usually, bend that often. And light is more towards, like a shirt, maybe a light t-shirt, perhaps a light scarf or something like that. Something that is very thin, something very light. Now, for instance, let's say we have a jacket. Let's just make a, let's see, we're gonna do that on a different layer actually, just to make this a little bit more easy for ourselves. So let's make a very simple, non-specific jacket. So on this character, I'm gonna go and draw a jacket like this, as you can see, so we get the jacket's form. Now I'm not gonna do anything just yet, so you can see where I think about wrinkles and stuff like that. Alright, so now we have the jacket. Now for heavy material, it usually only bends where you bend the body. So for instance, some may appear at the armpits, just a small, because sometimes depending on how you move, it kind of wrinkles underneath. And as usual, here you have some wrinkle because, and it usually pops out like this. Sometimes even more, sometimes double up. Because leather usually, I'm trying to think how much wrinkle do I want to show, because I want to show you that it's a heavy material kind of jacket. Therefore I should not perhaps do too much wrinkle, because then it won't be the same when I do it in the light version. Because if you look at a leather jacket, for instance, you usually only see the texture and perhaps the lighting, but the wrinkles are always like in the elbows, sometimes even at the waist, depending on if the jacket is, for instance, like flowing backwards. Then you get somewhere here around the waist that it bends, even when it's flowing backwards. So for instance, if we have the arm here and the jacket is flowing towards us like this, it usually only bends somewhere in the middle, and then you have the wrinklage here in the elbow and such like that. Okay, so try to remember that heavy material usually only bends at certain points, usually where you bend the body. But you can, as usual, this is my way of doing it and my way of thinking. It doesn't have to be like that, but this is what I usually think about when doing like more heavy stuff. And for instance, let's go and do a light sweater. Okay, let's just do a light sweater. Same thing here. I'm gonna go and do just like this, and you can see I'm trying to not to make it too perfect or equally on each side. I try to make it a little bit more random, so it feels like, yeah, he's been moving in this shirt. And I'm making it a little bit more tighter, because here, when it comes to light, depending also, now it's a sweater, so you have a little bit thickness to the material, but I usually try to think, okay, somewhere around the chest area it's gonna be a little bit wrinklage. Somewhere around the armpits, it's gonna be somewhere around the stomach, and also get some of that popping out, perhaps, depending on the pose. Now the character is just standing, so it won't show you much, but even then you get some wrinklage even then. So let's see, we're gonna do some wrinkle at the elbows as usual. Sometimes, depending on how defined the shirt is or how light, you can show some of the collarbone and stuff like that. So you can see we have a lot more wrinkles in the light version than in the heavy, and this is just a standing still kind of neutral pose. For instance, when you're moving, if he's twisting his body, you can even do heavier on the chest. You can even move it more here. Maybe the chest area is coming in like this and going crazy like that. Maybe it's even more wrinklage in the elbows and the armpits and stuff like that. Okay, so that's one version of it. Let's make another one. Okay, for instance, let's say we have a scarf. We can do that. Let's say we have a scarf. Now these are gonna be the same scarf, and I'm just gonna go and do a stereotypical scarf kind of thing like this, and boom, like that. And let's just do it like this so we don't have to waste much time here. Just copy it and move it over there. Okay, there we go. And I'm gonna combine these so we get easier. Let's go. So now we have a heavy and a light scarf. For instance, these won't show much difference. Once again, depending on the material, I usually say when it's very thin, very light, do more wrinkles, because that fabric is supposed to pretty much, wrinkle up a little bit more. The heavy is supposed to be, strong, and it's a little bit more sturdy, so it won't show as much wrinkles. But for this, let's try and do this. Let's say the wind, my way of showing wind, is coming from this way and going to the right. Okay, so how much would the heavy scarf, let's say the neck area won't change that much, but this part, the hanging part, will change. But the difference here is the heavy will probably only have like a little bit of sway, like this. Perhaps one wrinkle, maybe like a 1.5. On the light side, however, now, depending once again on how light it is, I would say maybe the light would perhaps even change a little bit in the neck area. I would say perhaps something like this. Let's see, I'm gonna go with this. I'm gonna push it a little bit closer, because once again, from the direction the wind is coming, like that. And most likely here you see the big difference, because the light version probably should be flowing a lot more and have a little bit more flow and wrinkles to it. So you can see heavy is not as affected because it's heavier, it weighs more, so the wind can't grab it as much. It's kind of like, you see in superhero things. Let's say we have the same thing with the cape. So let's say we have Superman here standing still. So we have the shoulder where the cape is. Now this is something that usually you see a lot of comic artists, especially when it comes to superheroes. They kind of change the material depending on what they want, in the pose, if it's gonna look cool, or if it's just, oh, this is a good shot, this is a good composition. So let's say for heavy, if the cape was really heavy, if the cape was kind of like had weight to it, and was a very heavy fabric, the wind would probably only go something like this. The cape would probably only, show a little bit of wrinklage and flowing down like this. Okay? But if it's light, yeah, then you get the popular version where the cape is kind of like flowing all over the place. Let's say it even goes outside. So sort of like this. So you can see it depends on weight sometimes, heavy and light For the light version, it could be the same material. Sometimes you can also say, hey, the wind is really, really strong, or it's like a superpower force that's pushing. Okay, fine. Even heavy stuff can flow or, you know, have more wrinklage depending on the force that's, you know, affecting the material. But if it's just, you know, realistic, you know, winds and gravity and stuff like that, yeah, I usually tend to do less with heavy, more with light material, so to speak. But if the question was more directed towards when and how do I do these wrinkles, well, for that I would probably say, you know, watch references. You know, if you have a specific kind of clothing that you're interested in doing, perhaps a shirt or a jacket, kind of like me, when I try to do fashion in some way, I tend to look at references, photos, and try to see how it moves and where it twists and where it bends and where the wrinkles are in that kind of material. And if my pose is something that isn't shown in photos, I can use that references to kind of guess and see where it should probably get wrinkles. But for instance, like wrinkles I usually do is for chest, I like to do the 2-line kind of wrinkles. Sort of like the big line and the small line. So it's kind of like that, but you could also do something like this. For here you can do something like this. You try to bend it, do not do this, the straight one. Try to bend and try to sense like, okay, the arm is round, therefore the wrinkle should be like this. Or for instance, like, hey, here's a wrinkle here. I try to think if he, you know, folds his sweater up. I usually try to think it like 2 rings. This is the thinking, like 2 rings. But when I do it, I kind of do it like this, so it becomes kind of random. It doesn't become perfect rings. And then I do kind of like this. And then, of course, when it comes to wrinkles here, because now the sweater is folded up and it will have a unusual stop. So I try to do something like that, and then you get the folded up sweater. So that's one way of doing it, and there's a lot of ways to do it, and my way is my way, and I just recommend you to look at references and try to see what kind of wrinkles you like to do. But like I said, heavy, try to not to do much wrinkles. In light, do more. Depending on the material, of course. If it's like fine silk, yeah, it's gonna be a lot more flowy, perhaps, and stuff like that. But if it's like a t-shirt of some sort, yeah, you can go a little bit more rough and try to get it to work. And just try to look at maybe your own clothes and see, okay, how does it look, or how can I translate my wrinkles in my clothes to a drawing? Because also, don't try to do a realistic wrinklage, you know, sweater wrinkles, because there's so many, and if the character is kind of simple and the clothes are very heavily detailed, it will mismatch. So think about that as well. It's okay if you want to do very realistic clothes. I'm totally okay with that, and you should do whatever fits your version of it. I'm just saying, sometimes if you have a very simple character design and you have very detailed clothes, it can mismatch or feel like the character is just, you know, kind of pasted on to something else. So that's just a warning from me, but hey, if you like that style, good for you. Good for you. But that's my tips on clothes, wrinkles, and stuff like that, depending on gravity, material, and what force is, you know, making them move or something like that. If it's leather, or if it's, you know, sweater, or it's a t-shirt, silk, you know, maybe it's armor or something like that. Everything has its own way of moving, and so you have to think about that. I hope you have learned something today, and I will see you in the next tutorial video that I hope that you will please write to me in the comment section below what you want it to be. Because I am sort of kind of having less and less things to talk about. So if you want some help, it can be small, it can be big, it doesn't matter. Let me know in the comment section below. It will help me out so I can help you. Okay? I will see you in the next tutorial video. Bye!